Hello, everybody, and welcome to Minds of Science, the podcast where we speak with researchers and other scientifically literate people to uncover the human side of discovery. We dive deep into their life experiences, their challenges, the triumphs, and the practical wisdom to give students and young researchers the advice, the inspiration, and the sense of community they need to thrive. I am Dr. Pablo Añón Pérez, your host, and today I am joined by my co-host, Dr. David Maybach. And today we will speak to young researchers who might be doing what could be their first research project, which will be your master thesis. During this episode, we will give you plenty of practical advice about how to choose your supervisor, how to choose your topic, and what you should take into account to make the transition from your master program to your PhD program as smooth as possible. But before we start, if you like this content, please give us a like, subscribe, leave a comment, and most importantly, share this episode with someone that you think will benefit from it. We all know how hard and lonely research can be, and that's why we created this podcast, to create a community and support for those who need it the most. And without further ado, I leave you with this episode with Dr. David Maybach. Dr. Maybach.
Apparently now, yes.
Apparently now. First episode of the podcast.
Yes.
Excited?
Yes, very much. Very much.
So we said today to speak about master thesis.
Exactly.
I think a lot of people will have problem with this, and we want to share our experience and failures on the way, as well as give some advices on how to proceed in a smarter way.
Yes.
Which is funny because probably we hear these advices or similar before and we fail anyways. But let's try anyways to put it out there.
Yes, one man's failure is another man's victory, right? So let's see if we can share some valuable advice so that other people don't do the same mistakes or, can enjoy the same victories.
Yes, we do that too also quite well. So let's start with, we spoke before starting the interview about where to do the master or master thesis, no? You have to choose a little bit. Let's say you are end of the bachelor, you think, I want to do a master for sure. It's something I thoroughly recommend to basically everyone.
Yes, especially in the natural science, right? It's
yes.
Sort of without a master, you're not even considered a part of the community, I would say.
No, and from the reformation of the study plans, from the Bologna plan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you need to finish your studies with the master for sure. And I think it's a very good opportunity to grow at the personal level, and that's why we were speaking. I think it's very good if you plan to go abroad. So first of all, if you have not gone away from home already, do it now. Yes. But if you have gone abroad, maybe it's a good opportunity to be more abroad, another country.
I mean, to some degree, you're very limited or not very limited, but you're constrained to what opportunities your university, at which you did your bachelor's degree, is providing you, right? And so, depending on your interests and also scientifically, but also personally, the interests and your likes and dislikes, you might, of course, evaluate what might speak for a changing of location and what might speak against it. But in general, I would recommend it to everyone, especially also going abroad to gain some international experience. Of course, depends where you go or how much this experience is benefiting yourself. But even if you just you don't move far away from you, in terms of longitude and latitude, but in terms of the culture and maybe the university system, so the international system, or for instance here in Germany, it will be the German system, which is quite different, right? So you might check your preferences in there, and then of course it's subject-wise, right? I mean, we both have the personal experience that there were certain things to our undergrad degree that we disliked or that we liked, and then we did basically new orientations during our master degree. And this is one very important aspect that you should, even before you choose your master thesis itself, consider when you go and choose for or decide for a master degree, right?
Yeah, because if you go to a university that doesn't have the subject that you want,
exactly,
end of the game.
And this is surprisingly more frequent than you would think, right? That there are a lot of universities. I mean, they over the years they built some sort of expertise, and they mostly try to deepen these expertise in the sense that they can then be an outstanding like institution for one subject. For instance, in my like undergrad university was in Karlsruhe in Germany, and they really focused on particle physics and statistical physics. And for that, arguably, they are one of the world-leading institutions, right? They are also in like a research collaboration and so on. But if you're now a student, as I was, who's majorly interested in astrophysics, you're literally lost there. So there's no, I mean, I haven't had an astrophysics class in like 2 or 3 years of studying my bachelor's degree there. And this can be sometimes also depressing, but...
and I think it's something that maybe people don't know so much, I can even think about, because if I put myself into my past self shoes,
yeah,
because the bachelor is common everywhere, more or less,
yeah,
broadly speaking, you think the continuation and the research is everywhere. Like everywhere there is a faculty of physics, they do all of physics, but that's absolutely not true. As you said, they're specialized, and some universities are very strong in solid state, optics, or astro.
yes.
And the farther you go into your academic path, the more you have to look for those that align with your interests.
Yes.
So
that's very true. So I think you're not like there's generally no one aware of that, right? Like if you don't get this input, like you just choose by. I mean, you have university rankings that you choose, but they are very superficial. I mean, even if you have a world-class ranked university, it might not even be closest to the best in like a very particular subject. So you really have to dig into that, and this requires a little bit of effort, right? Because even if you go to the university homepage and they always speak about themselves in like the best manners, of course, naturally, and they have like all of the universities, they have like an abundance of research, even in like a very niche subject like theoretical physics. But it's really about the people that are at the university and like so the research group leaders that one has to carefully take into account there. And then I think to generally judge about that, it's a non-trivial thing. You should sort of know the community a little bit. And if you're a bachelor student, I would actually recommend to talk a little bit to other professors about that, because they are in the field. They're in the field for like 20, 30 years. They know the people, and they will also, I mean, there's no harm in asking them, even if it's like, so I'm looking for something beyond that and so on. Like, for instance, like beyond statistical physics or something like that, they will even then know some people in the field.
And professors are usually quite honest about, I don't do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't want to get involved into too many projects too broad, because you lost specificity. And they can probably orient you much better.
Yeah.
If you are interested into this, speak with this person or go to this university and you sort that out. Personally, I remember, well, that's one thing I did not take into account when I came to Germany. Well, I made sure that the master curricula was interesting to me.
Yes,
that's for sure. At least you have that. But my main reason to move to another country was I did not do an Erasmus because I wanted to move abroad in the master with personal idea of if I want to study abroad, I want to stay if I feel like. So, an Erasmus is a very contained, it's a sandbox. You're in there.
Yeah.
With the Erasmus people.
It's a community itself.
Community is an experience in itself, but I wanted to live abroad, and that was different. But the other reason I chose Germany is because for the study plans. You said there were different study plans in different universities, and here the master involved is 2 years. One of them is classes, one of them is research. And it was very interesting, the idea that having one full year of research, because that will give me I thought, and I was very right on that, deep enough taste of what it is like to do research to then decide if I want to continue or not. Because at that time, I was not sure.
That's actually a very interesting point, right? Because you are now speaking about the European system, like more or less, and the German system, right? It's very different to the US as well. Then, so this is something that we have to consider also now because we are more and more international, right? So after your bachelor's degree, you technically have the chance to go abroad. Even now, that's like a little bit more difficult with like political situations and so on. But in principle, there is the opportunity. But now you're facing the decision either to make a master's degree for like, let's say on average 2 years here in Europe, and then continue with a PhD for, in theoretical physics, I would say 3 to 4 years. Or you go to the US and you start after your bachelor's and you do like these PhD programs, which are like realistically 5 to 6 years. But you have a sort of integrated master degree in that, right? And so this is another very important decision. I would generally not recommend to do a master degree here first in Europe and then transition to these PhD programs, because I think then you are very senior after your PhD already, right? And so
I don't know how is the convalidation possibilities between subjects. Like if you could go there and prove that you did the master here, they will accept you halfway through or something like that.
I think generally
But
not.
Switching systems is always a risk.
Yes. And I think there's also, so in the academic world, especially in the European universities, then you have to consider certain things as like there has to be a certain limit of time that you can only apply for permanent positions after your PhD and so on. So it's a bit, that's very intricate, and this is a very like far-sighted sort of consideration that you have to do. But in general, like you have to compare the two options, and one would be you are at like your at best second postdoc in Europe, while the same person who's did the same in the US is like just finished his PhD, his or her PhD. So it's a whole like different system. But the system is one thing. Then, as you mentioned, also the scientific aspect is another thing. For instance, if you are in a subject which has theoretical and experimental branches, as in physics, you have to also consider which direction you want to go. And then some universities provide lab courses also during the master's, some don't. For me personally, it was a clear choice to avoid as many lab courses as I can do. So I choose the master accordingly, right? And then you pursue in this direction, I would say, right? And whether you do it in one system or in another, you then start a trail towards a more scientific approach to things. I think it's very important that people are aware of that the bachelor degree is something, in my opinion, and of course from my experience, I can only tell that, so that it's something where you learn the fundamentals, right, the very foundations of a subject, but then in the master degree, you really get a peek inside, like a small peek inside the really scientific approach. So you're almost scratching at the surface of actual cutting-edge research.
I realized very much when during my PhD, reviewing the notes or some courses of topics that I really delved into, and realized that the courses that you see during the bachelor are very limited in the scope and the depth.
And also the ways of choosing, right? You have freedom in like adjusting.
Yeah. So let's say you have chosen your master wisely, and if you don't know so well where to go, there are also more master projects programs that are more broad and less specialized. And if you make a mistake, then you can always change. That's always a situation. But academia is a difficult place, and if you know where you want to go and you put your efforts into it, it's going to be much easier. So let's say you are in your master studies, and we spoke that it's very important that you start aiming as soon as possible for your master thesis topic and supervisor.
Yes.
I think it's a big mistake leaving it to the last moment when you have to finish all your courses and they say, now I do my master thesis, now I start with everything. Because it might be the case that the courses are not related, and I think here you can put two things into a table. If you're into a new university, it's a good idea to start getting to know the staff, people who work in there and the professors and what they do, and then either aim for courses that are aligned with your interests, of course, but also see if you can get a course with the professors that you are interested into and try to get a little bit of in touch with them.
Exactly, yeah.
To establish a little bit of a relationship, and get the opportunity to speak with them, and see if it will be possible to get a master or not, because sometimes a master thesis with them or not, because sometimes it's the case that you're interested in a professor, and let's say he's not going to retire very soon, it looks good, and you speak with them and they say, yeah, but in 1 year I go to another university, no chance to get a master thesis with me. Get it as soon as possible to see what are your options in there.
Exactly. Yeah, I think generally it's a funny analogy, but like professors are the most valuable currency at the university, and you have to somehow like allocate some opportunities as early as you can, as you said, right? And the master degree is nice in the sense that you are, especially if the university provides very, very specialized courses, you sometimes are just like 10 or 12, 20 students or even less. And then it's really a good opportunity to get to know them. And I mean, it's not generally given that any professor has to accept you for a master thesis, right? This might be the case in certain universities, certain institutions, because of their regulations and their way of doing things. But in general, I mean, first of all, you don't want to do a master thesis with a professor who doesn't want to supervise you, and second of all, you also don't want to force them into something like that, right? So it's really like, and their availabilities, they are very busy people. You have to take it into consideration a lot of things.
And because if they're gonna orient you afterwards, if you kind of force them into a situation they are not comfortable with, or into a field that they are not so familiar with, they're gonna not be able to supervise you properly, guide you, and orient you afterwards to whatever you want to do.
And they are the most valuable recommendation that you get after your master's.
That is something I think we will emphasize a lot during this podcast. Get a good relationship with your supervisors. It's
exactly
very hierarchical world, academia.
It is, unfortunately it is, but I mean, if you choose the path, you have to know what you're diving into, right?
It's a game. It's a politics game, and you have to know the rules, and if you decide to play, then you play. If you don't, you don't.
Hate the game, not the players, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right, but let's talk about again about the choices that you can do here, right? You said already that you want to try to orientate yourself as much as possible with the courses, or align your courses with your interests. But it might be also the case that you're at this point not really sure about what your interests are, right? And then I would recommend to try, of course, diversify your viewpoint, and by some margin before your master thesis, before you start looking seriously for a supervisor, you should definitely try to fix it, to narrow it down, right?
Yeah.
And you can also, like, it doesn't necessarily say that you have to take a lot of courses to get like an idea of what you find interesting. There might also be the possibilities that you can do like smaller projects or something like that. Especially if you are like more into experimental physics, they sometimes provide that you like have a small peek into the lab work, or
internship, or summer schools that they have.
And then I will also recommend, then if you're really lost at this point, I would rather trade off half a year of doing an internship or like a small project somewhere else than rushing into something that you don't want to do actually, but you just do it.
Or with someone that you don't want to do it.
Exactly. That's even more important.
Yeah, and that's, I cannot stress it enough. Who you work with can be much more important than the project that you work. Yes. I think if you study physics, you're a very curious person, hopefully, and then you might feel that one field drags you more into one direction, but if the professor is a bad choice because he's not someone pleasurable to work with, or he's very isolated, or has not published, it's much better, and you will have much more fun, and will be a much pleasurable experience, and better for your prospects future to go to another professor that has a more flourishing group, let's say. So do a balance of those options. What topics are you interested in, and how the group works. Exactly. I have seen also a lot of people super narrow in their options, and maybe even not finding options. So I really want to do that. Yeah, but no one here does that. Yeah. But I want to do that, and then get stuck for a lot of time.
I literally have a very close friend who ignored most of the red flags that were sent out by the professor, and they just chose it because the topic was very appealing, and at the end it was a horrible experience. Because it's not only that you are in a relationship with this person, like a work relationship, for like a substantial amount of time, it's also that you are dependent on them, right? They have absolutely the position of power over you, especially if you're interested in continuing after that. If they don't write you a recommendation letter, it's very hard to continue then. And so it's a really careful choice. And I can recommend people already at this stage to maybe speak to other group members, right? Most of the time, if you're a master's student, you will work together with like a postdoc potentially, or even a PhD student in this group. And it doesn't hurt to just ask them for like 10 minutes of the time, or stop by the office and ask like, hey, so I'm interested in your group, you do cool stuff, right? I mean, they also like to hear that most of the time. And then you just ask a little bit about the work environment there, right? Like, how is the professor doing? How are they treating? How is the supervision sounding? Because this is very, I mean, this is, as you said, it's often very underestimated, but it can make your master degree, which is exactly like 6 months, right? At least or more. Yeah, it's
here in Germany. At least 9. That is usually 12.
Yes, more. So it can really make this a horrible experience, or like the best time of your life.
So in that regard, I guess, going to the webpage of the university, look at the staff working in there, send a couple of emails and ask them, hey, I'm interested in doing my master's here, and I would like to take a coffee and then chat a little bit about the experience of the group and how it is. And people usually are, especially advanced people, are very friendly and happy with that. I think because, so if you're in your master, you have not done that ever and might feel a little bit weird, but once you're advanced, you realize how important it is, and you are more than happy to speak with new possible students and people to work with, because you're very happy, and if you're not happy, to tell them no, it's a mistake, it's a trap. And sadly, because this hierarchical structure in the academia we spoke about, I have heard a lot of horror stories of students being abused one way or another by the supervisor, or being ignored by the supervisor, and that can really decide your career in many aspects, or at best just making it very miserable.
Yes. And especially to international students, I recommend to carefully take this into consideration, right? Especially if you're also the EU, you have a visa that runs out eventually. And I mean, of course, we're not in the US, so that people will not hold you gunpoint and chase you out of the country. But you still have these complications, and there can be serious repercussions.
There are many ways of pressuring a person in the system.
Exactly. And you don't want to put this leverage on yourself, right? So it's really, as you mentioned, like these two factors, this scientific and supervisor, which we cannot emphasize enough, basically, is an important choice. And then
we will make another episode of managing conflict with supervisor.
Exactly. And then also to maybe put this perspective of choosing the master thesis a bit more into a far-sighted version of your career. If you then, maybe at this point you don't even know if you want to continue in academia or not, but if you want to keep this option open, it's always important.
Which you should always have.
Yes. In my opinion as well, yes. And then you should really carefully consider that your master thesis is an entry ticket to pursuing a PhD or a more active research career in this direction. It's like, as we said before, it's the first serious step into approaching cutting edge research. And cutting edge, I mean, really, like, I know many people who turn their master thesis in the first publication, and then it's really important that you consider that, of course, if you apply to a person and you have experience with your master thesis in the direction of the PhD that you're applying for, it's much easier to get in than if you choose fields completely. It's not impossible to choose fields completely. For me, it was also a different story. I switched from a subject more related to string theory to like gravitational waves, which are very different things, and it can be done. But I'm saying it's generally much easier if you have this track already lined for you.
Yeah, and before getting back into the thesis itself, up until now, if you are in the master point, okay, you have to apply to get into a master, but it's not that hard. But getting a PhD, then people pay to you.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have to prove that it's worthwhile to invest into you. So that really is a fight, and you have to prove yourself worthwhile. And the only way you do that is by previous work and recommendations. So you absolutely don't want to burn those bridges, otherwise it can be very, very difficult.
Yes. And so, yeah, just the last comment about this. I mean, this, as we mentioned, there are like a lot of factors into choosing the master thesis, but this is definitely something that should be considered there. And it's not easy because it feels like you make a choice which sets your career path. I know it because I personally also had the choice. I had to choose between two very different master theses. But at the end, for me personally, at least now, I think I did the right choice. And even if you do the wrong choice, you can still alter. But keep it in mind. Keep it in mind that the exploration phase should be over in the ideal case. But we will talk about also this in a later.
Yeah, if you do a mistake, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
But if you can avoid it, better.
Okay.
So let's say you have a supervisor on a topic. You sit, so they have accepted you, and then you sit with them first meeting to do what? What should you expect from here on? No? Once you are into it, how do you proceed with the topic, with the research, with the relationship with the supervisor? How would you go from there?
So, in my opinion, it's like there are 3 stages to this thesis writing. They might be overlapping, or like basically, I wouldn't call it thesis writing. It's basically like a project work, right? You start a project really. And the first one is you do like a literature investigation, literature research. So where your supervisor will point you out to many papers that you build off a ground, like sort of like a foundational knowledge about what you have to do. They might also be referencing to previous lecture notes. So that's why it's so important that you may already know the topic or the person from your coursework, right? Because then you can build up much more easily. You have a smooth transition into the literature. Then there is the investigation where you actually carry out the work, and last but not least, the writing. So first things first, start with the research. And I would like to talk first about
first maybe the project. Then you can speak with the supervisor about what is the project and what is your scope.
Exactly.
What are we aiming for?
Yes.
What are we?
The
what
first
do we
meetings,
expect?
basically.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if your supervisor don't do that, because sometimes they're a little bit vague on that, try to be, and it's a general advice, as specific as possible, I would say. You meet and you don't only want to say, this project, and start reading into it. Like, no. What is the goal, and what would be a reasonable time frame to do this? Because it's very, very easy to start reading into a topic, and physics topics or natural science usually are endless. You start into one and there are books and books and deeper, and you spend 2 months, and then you come back and you say, now what? And he's like, this should have taken 2 weeks. I just wanted a overview of it. You did not know to master it completely. So be very clear about what is expected to you, and I would say at the beginning, ask for a little bit more of guidance of how much time should I invest into learning this topic. Should I really get into this topic, or is just an overview? And you should ask for some books, paper, lecture notes, an orientation into getting into it. And what I really like to do in these first meetings is setting up a working system. So I speak with them very clearly. Some professors are more organized than others. What is going to be expected from you, and how you're going to keep a checkpoint of how things work. We spoke. So first, I would say you do an overview of the project. Let's say if it's 1 year, you do a totally unreasonable estimation of how it will work, and you say, okay, 3 months of literature research, 3 months of investigation, 2 months of writing, 1 month of buffer. Let's say 9-month master thesis of here. Afterwards, it's totally different, but at least you have some guidance of or where you are. And in some places, this is mandatory.
Yes, true.
And then establish a set of checkpoints with your supervisor. Can be weekly meetings, can be bi-weekly, monthly. Speak about which type of supervision do you want. Do you want a lot of hands-on supervision, so you want him to guide you a lot, or you prefer more freedom to do your own stuff? All of these are things that you need to negotiate with them a little bit.
It might also be the case that if you don't choose your best supervisor for whatever reasons, right? it might also be that they're not that flexible, but at
Yeah.
least they will also always give you a low boundary on expectations somehow. And I think this is very important, as you said, because, well, first of all, for yourself, so that you know like where and what to invest, and you don't spend like 10 months reading on like some review or paper or something like that and trying to do every calculation, but to move forward in your own pace. And then also in terms of later on in recommendations letters, you know what kind of sort of threshold you have to exceed in order to impress your supervisor, right? Because as you said before, it's a very important source of reference letters for you, perhaps the most important one if you want to apply. And so if you are clear on that, if you clearly communicate with your supervisor that, okay, so we do that in that pace, we do one weekly meeting, then if you agree on that and you send him, in addition to this weekly meeting, like a small overleaf note about your updates or something like that, or new calculations, you are already showing that you are like very self-independent and you can streamline and organize these project flows, and this will like it will be mirrored then in your
basically
your reference letter.
You know what is expected from you. You prevent putting yourself in a situation where they say that was not enough. Like, no, you told me it was enough. This is what we spoke about.
Exactly, that's very much true. Yes. And then let's speak also about the organizational aspect then. If you are clear on this and it's basically, I would say this meeting and this sort of like agreement between you and your supervisor is like the starting point of the actual process, right?
After this, they tell you, fly little bird,
exactly.
See you in a week or two or whatever.
Yeah, or a month sometimes, but exactly, that's the word. So do you have any recommendations on the
Organization?
Exactly.
Let's say you start with the what they have given you, some papers, some books. I will start by setting up a system of organization that you will change most likely, but start trying with something and don't get too obsessive about it, because there are apps over apps building on how to organize better. I tried millions of Obsidian, Notion, Zotero. In the end, I switched, and I think it's not bad either to pick one and then switch to another as the necessity arises. But what I found that is really good at the beginning is to set a literature manager, basically. Zotero, Mendeley, and other options around. Basically, what I look when I have those is somewhere I can dump everything related to the PhD, categorize it with tags or folders or something of the kind. That allows me to include annotations into the PDF, so I want to be able to highlight and bookmark stuff. And a feature that I really used is an integrated research, so you can search in a search bar and looks into all of the, not only on the title, but inside all of the files, so I can recall and recover some notes, an idea. Yeah. And you keep it and you use it. Very important, not only for organizing yourself, but afterwards to managing the bibliography for whatever project you're going to use. Now, if I will start now, I will also start using Notebook LM. I don't know if you know it.
No.
So it's an IA platform by Google where you dump all the content that you want in terms of books, paper, lecture notes, slides, web pages, whatever. And then basically really fast trains a model based on that, and the model asks you answer you questions based on the literature, and you interact with the model saying, explain me this, do me a questionnaire about this, write a summary of it. And I think I will use it a lot. That nowadays would be very useful, because it answers based on the database that you put, and all the answers have a reference to it. So if you want to expand, you can click and they say, this book, this page.
Yeah.
And once you have said that, I would say do a really overview of what you have to do. So don't get into, I get one book, chapter 1, into it. Write in the table of contents. What are the chunks around? What is interesting to me? What is related to the topic we spoke? What is briefly this paper about? Briefly, so you have a mental structure of different containers that need to be filled and how much you need to fill them. because otherwise you are going to get full into too much detail into one book or so. And for some paper, maybe you just need an explanation on the introduction because it touches very nicely on whatever you're going to do. Others, you need to go really into the details and make a very broad overview aspect of the project, the questions, the literature about it, and which things you want to get answered in the literature. Now, which questions you have that you have to look for in literature. Because afterwards, once you get deep into one topic, you cannot see what is around. So it's very important to have all these zoom in, detail, zoom out, where I am. Zoom in, zoom out, where I am.
Yes, very much. I also have to say that, like, by personal experience, I'm not the most organized person, and it also...
It's a skill.
It's a skill. It actually is. And you might underestimate the time frame of a thesis, right? Even if it's only 6 months, you will come to the point, if you don't have this sort of framework for yourself, where you start with the literature review, right, and then continue into the project, you will inevitably end up at the point where after 5 months you check a reference at least twice.
Yeah.
So you will come back to the initial points and thought, and also, I mean, you are much deeper in the topic right now, right? So you know the calculations that are done and so on, and now you might have a new idea or something like, wait a minute, I saw this before, where was it, and so on and so forth, right? So you really want to try to have this structure from the beginning. And I also actually like to start writing in some overleaf template. For us physicists, overleaf, right? This is very familiar, but Word you can use or whatever. And then because then you have already the references there. And even if you just comment this portion out, you know where something was written and what might be necessary, because as I said, in 4 months of time, after doing some work and some investigations, you will not remember that like in detail. You might remember that you've seen it somewhere, but you want to go back and forth. And that's really important. And you really can see the difference in quality for well-organized like thesis work in comparison to like just people were all over the stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying which I was accounting myself to, but you see the difference, right? And then also for future references beyond your thesis, you might actually come back to that especially if you continue. It's a good preparation, I believe.
And that brings me 2 points in mind. One is you need to do different types of reading or studying of literature. There is the overview, and there are from the overview to I follow step by step each calculation of a paper. There are different layers, and you have to be able to switch between those different depths through all these steps depending on what you need. If it's really into your topic and you know you're going to work into this, go through the calculations, take the time. It's ultra slow to go into this. Sometimes it takes a couple of days to go through a whole paper, but it's worthwhile. My experience is if you don't write it, I can follow the math, but if I don't write it, it doesn't sink in. It's really important. And that can be coding if you are into computer science or similar or whatever. And the other one is the log, notes of what you have done, which I think is very useful and bring me a little bit back to the meeting with your supervisor, which is you don't want that meeting to take you a lot of time. You don't want to be that meeting to need one whole morning to prepare what you're going to present in the next day, because then your work week is 1 day less, and that's a lot.
Yes, and also your supervisor doesn't have time.
And they will not appreciate it so much. They don't care so much. So it needs to be something, and I really like this idea of you need to set up a working system where the output is structured enough so you can present it immediately. So you don't need to stop, organize, and then present. And for that, a good thing I really appreciated to have in the PhD, especially in later stages, is basic register or log of what you have done weekly.
Yes.
Of today, simply the way I did it, but there are multiple ways, is every morning when I arrived to the office, I wrote a couple of lines of this is what I want to try to achieve today, and then a couple of lines in the end of the morning or in the end of the day of this is what I did. Ideally, they match. Usually they don't, because one of the points is, I tried to do this. I got stuck, and therefore I went into this other branch and spent the whole morning into it.
Yes.
But then you do it, because then when you go to the meeting with your supervisor, you simply have to gather all these notes for the week, and you can say, either I did this, or I did that, or I tried to do this and it did not work, but I tried all these other ways that it did not work. And all of that is valid as long as you communicate it with your supervisor. I think it's really bad to go to the meeting with your supervisor and say, I have nothing. And what do you mean nothing? No, nothing.
That's a very good important, a very good point. Also because, for most of the subjects that we can relate to that potentially, a result showing that something doesn't work is also a result, right? And it's important to document why, because the supervisor is at a very superficial level of this in-depth
This is
calculation.
his own world.
Exactly.
With his problem.
If it's a professor, even more than the postdoc, but they have an idea and they have an idea why something should work. And if you just say, it doesn't work, I did the calculations, they will be like, but have you tried that? No, it should work, blah, blah, blah. But if you really can show them, and you have, to some degree, you have to convince them that your work is correct and that their idea may or may not work, right? And I think the hardest point is to convince them that the idea does not work, which is more than once the case, right? So you have to be aware of the fact that your supervisor is not this a celestial being that is always right. Exactly. No, they make mistakes as well, and sometimes the ideas turn out to be not that good, but you can evolve on that, you can develop on that, right? But it's really important to have some substance, and you can easily do that if you write it down along the lines. Even maybe some small equations or some small results here and there, but you have to prove convincingly in this meeting that you did something, and this something is valuable for the process.
Which is a very good pro of natural sciences.
Exactly.
You cannot, it's not me against you. It's like, it doesn't work, look at it, it doesn't work, it's here. It's not my opinion, it's here.
Yes.
And that might be a point of friction for a lot of people.
That's true.
Because it's difficult to say what you believe that is right based on what you have done. So it's very important that you do things right and with care, and you prove yourself that your calculation is right, because then it will be almost impossible to not say to your supervisor, it does not work.
Yes.
I cannot tell you differently, it does not, and here is why. I tried it and it does not. And if you think I'm wrong, just look at this and tell me where I'm wrong.
Exactly. And on the other hand, it might be actually that your supervisor has valuable input for you, right?
Which at the beginning of the master is very likely to be the case.
Right? Then there is one aspect that I wanted to emphasize, which helped me a lot, to be honest, but it was a bit different times because it was during Corona, right? So I had only Zoom meetings, which made it very easy to record our meetings, because your supervisor will ramble about stuff a lot, and it may not always be the straightforward solution, right?
And take for granted that you know many things and speak about things, like if you will speak about making a cake, like you do this, I will calculate this, with this person, you're like, what the fuck?
Yeah. What just happened here? Or can you repeat this, please? No, it's a bit difficult because you don't want. Sometimes in very intricate topics, if you would go into everything into detail, the meeting would take hours, and none of you have.
It would be a lecture followed by a meeting.
Exactly,
maybe.
And they supervisors don't want to do that, and so to act more self-independent and also to don't annoy any of your supervision entities, it might be useful to record. Of course, when you're not in a Zoom meeting, it's a bit more difficult, but then you can still, if you meet personally, you can try to write down as much information as you can, right? And even say hey, stop, I want to write this down for somebody. You don't have to ask them in-depth questions. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes not, but you have to decide individually. But at least
sometimes the meetings can be also very useful for that. They open a door that you did not know that you didn't know, and then they explain to you in half an hour something that it will take you 3 to study on your own.
But keywords, you have you can do literature research.
And I really liked in the later stages to put a recording on the table and record all the meeting. Especially nowadays with IA, you can record and have a transcription super easily, either on the phone itself or through Whisper or whatever translation service that you have, and then you can process it and have notes, and then you make it to PDF and put it in the folder of meetings with the date. Which is also very useful in case of conflict, because sometimes the supervisors forget that they told you something, and then you can go and say, no, we spoke about this in this meeting, and you told me to spend quite a couple of weeks testing this idea, and therefore this is what I did.
Yes. It's generally like you try to be as well structured and as well documented of what you want to do, right? And what you did and the way they proceed.
And this is, I think, big part of the learning that you get out of the research. It's not only about the topic in itself, it's behind the topic, there's a whole set of skills of organization, project management, negotiation, communication that are fundamental, and you will learn it, or it's very beneficial to learn either just in academia or not.
Yes, that's absolutely true.
Take it as part of the job, not as my job is doing science and all of this is just burdening me unnecessarily.
Yes, very much. Okay, but I think this is more or less this part of closely interacting with the supervisor. It stretches towards almost into your writing phase, right?
Yeah, that's the point that we were saying. These three phases, literature research, investigation, and writing, when you present them to a committee, usually they are consecutive because they like to see that you're organized. The reality is usually there are three planes that run in parallel, and you will highlight more one or another depending on the situation where you are.
Exactly. Okay, so but now in the stages of actually combining your results and trying to...
No, I would say, let's say a little bit before you are finishing the literature research and you start finding your topic and you start doing your own investigation. Let's speak a little bit about that. How, because I found myself with a lot of difficulties to do my own investigation.
Okay, yeah.
In terms, for example, of self-trust, it's difficult to say, I sit with a problem that I define and I try to solve it, and I have to trust that I am doing it correctly. I propose my own solutions, I do my own experiments, and I analyze it by myself. And that takes, for example, quite some courage when the solution is unknown. I felt I missed it in the bachelor exercise sheets. You know there is a solution and you have to get it right or wrong. And here is more about, is this solution good enough? Are my assumptions correct or not? And you have to be proposing the problem, doing it, and analyzing if your solution is right.
That's true.
And it's the first time you do that in your life.
That's true. It's the very first time where there's like no given solution that is provided to you, right? So you have to... sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle, right? Because you don't really know. I mean, you don't know generally if you're on the right path or not. You have the results, and then you have to interpret them in some way, right? I find this very difficult sometimes because if you're not used to that, it's a very new feeling, and it can be, as you mentioned, also slightly scary, right? But you should make sure that you have means of checking your result for reasonability, let's say.
Yeah.
Right? Especially before you present them to your supervisor, because you don't want to be in the position where you are like, okay, so listen, I have this result and so on, and then your supervisor is like, yeah, but wait, this is like nonsense. But it cannot be, right? And we have this condition that is violated here, and so on and so forth. So you need like a good overview of what is true, what is not true. But this is perhaps something which is very much related to theoretical physics, right? I mean, for most of the other experiments, as like in bioscience or chemistry, you more or less know the outcome that you want to achieve, or you know that there's some
but you also have to analyze the experiment, and sometimes the data is not as clear, and something that you think is a signal, your supervisor say, no, that's the detector that is faulty.
Okay, absolutely.
With a glance or something like that.
Sure. Yeah, for us, I mean, theoretical physics is a bit easier because you have the conditions that you have to violate or not violate mathematical conditions. So it's not trivial always to see these violations, but in principle they're like clear rules of how to follow. Yeah. Whilst when you work with actual data, it might be more
messy. Yeah. But it's very important, and something I would like to stress, to communicate as much as possible with your supervisor.
Yeah.
Sharing them data and opinion as much as possible, because they know more than you, very likely.
Yeah.
And they can save you a lot of time, and you should not feel guilty for asking for their attention. First of all, it's their job to help you. That's why they accepted the thesis. And second of all, if they want to shield their time, they have to shield their time. You don't choose to protect their time. So you ask, and it's on their behalf to say no or yes, but next week.
Exactly.
Which is usually the case. And I think the investigation part is rather artsy. You need a lot of, it's very individual to the situation where you are. And I think the biggest trap that I would suggest here is trying to do too much and forgetting about time frames. So getting too caught up into my solution or my results are not good enough and I will need more, or the project is not finished, and then months pass by and you get caught by deadlines, which I saw it very easy, and it's really difficult to say enough. This is enough. Yeah. Until here, I grab it, pack it, wrap it for the next person. A friend told me, projects are not finished, they are abandoned.
Yeah, that's cool. It's true, but it's true for like, especially if this idea that originated or was the foundation of your project, right? If this idea doesn't not work out, you tend to be afraid that your thesis will fail because you don't have the result that was desired by your supervisor in the initial phase, right? But this is not. I don't think it's a general reason to panic. I think if you are well documented your computations and you are sort of have as we spoke before, right? You have like proofs of your calculations that you did or of your experiments that you did and what doesn't work, what does work.
But you're not lazy, you did not waste the time.
Exactly. That's a result.
Follow the guidance.
And it's an important result and it's worth publishing. So even if you don't achieve the originated like holy grail of your master project, let's call it, you should not be worried. And
this is very normal. Research is like that. It's very, very often the case that you try something and you spend months into it and it doesn't work. And if it's part of your PhD thesis or project, that's okay because you have many more months to come. But if it's your master thesis, it might be that the only project that you have doesn't work, and that's normal, and your supervisor knows that, and you should know that. And I'm not gonna lie, emotionally sucks and it's gonna be very hard. I remember multiple experimental friends who later in the research they realized that the data was corrupted or contaminated by something, and they felt like everything was for nothing. But in the end, no. You communicate and the supervisor say, yeah, that happened, don't worry, we will make something about it.
Exactly.
So no reason to panic. And in this phase, continuing with the idea of tracking or logging the results, I really want to encourage how useful it is to write things often. I mean, in the end, your project, be it a PhD thesis, master thesis, monthly thing, is divided into micro projects in the end of this topic I want to solve, and this is part of a big puzzle. So every time you finish something, a topic, a calculation, anything that is, okay, I got to some kind of result, write it. Write it is going to make your life so much easier. I did this mistake during my master thesis where I just waited until the end to say, okay, now I sit to write. I'm going to review everything I did in the past 6 months or 9 months. And then you sit, you look back and think, I had no idea what I did 9 months ago. Yes. What are the notes? What were the literature that I had to reference? In which particular order? And you have to go through all over it again. I changed that during my PhD, and I was much more rigorous in the registration. And when I had to sit, it was more like putting pieces together that were already. So, you do a kind of a report paper of each of the projects. It doesn't need to be super well written, but what is the motivation? What is briefly the literature? What are your calculations? What are the references that you checked for it, and what are the conclusions? And if you have that, not only the writing will be much clearer, your suffering will be much less, and the output will be much better, and
Yes.
you will be seen as a much more organized person and valuable by your supervisor.
I actually do that still for my papers. I start writing at the very first moment, like also because it motivates me a bit, right? If I have like something which looks like a paper draft from the very beginning, I know that there's a project that if it will be finished, it will be ending in the publication. And so I mostly put it in the appendix. I do a lot of like what I read, like the material and so on, like summarize it there with the references, and then like add slight modifications, add ideas and comments, so that from that it develops naturally. Yeah, but this is I think this is an important point, not only because of the time frame and the let's say the scientific scope of the thesis, but also because of its extent, right?
Yep.
You never before have written a work which is that like
complex.
Yeah, complex and all like including, right? I mean, the master thesis can vary between, I would say, like 50 and 150 pages, which is a considerable amount of effort you have to put in. And then organizing here I think is a key step. For me, it also was a little bit of a struggle. And now that you have all the tools basically for writing such things, of course, naturally you should still be encouraged to. I mean, you have these guidelines and
use them nowadays.
But AI
use tools as much as possible.
Yeah.
Because writing is hard. Writing is mentally very taxing and sometimes frustrating, and it's long. It's a very slow process that I think deserves a whole episode in itself of how to write well, because it has a lot of key points. But at this point, I will suggest consider that writing will take 2 to 3 times longer than you expect.
Yes, I think it's a good estimate.
No. So you think, I will write this in a couple of weeks. Yeah, give it 1 month and a half to 2 months and then see. Because then you write, and then you rewrite, and then you check, and you correct, and then go back again, and then you go for the grammar, and then you realize, this section really doesn't match here, and you have to change it.
Exactly.
And it's good, it's normal, it's part of the writing process. But it's long, and if you have never done a piece that big and that complex, you need a lot of readings and rewritings top to bottom. So take that, and by all means use all the IA tools that you want. So I use them. The way I approach the writing tools is you write the ideas and the structure, and the IA help you with the grammar and the tone. Sometimes it's very difficult to get a professional tone if you have never written before. And it can give you suggestions on the logical presentation of it. But I will never make the IA to write the content. So I write the content, and then it helps me to structure it. It's the same as if I would pay someone to say, check this for consistency, please.
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of a master thesis might not appear to be a crucial thing to have a good writing. I mean, of course, you will be judged not only on the thesis, right? You will be judged also on your previous work, especially if you do experiments, or the main, at least in the natural science, the main point of your work is not the finished summary of the results, which is the thesis, but
because no one will read that.
Exactly. But I cannot emphasize this enough, basically. If you pursue an academic career, the quality of your papers is, like in writing, I mean only in writing, not of content-wise, I'm just speaking about writing, is very much, I think, can ease your life in terms of getting a peer-reviewed paper accepted or not. It's really, and it's crazy. It's
crazy how bad the content out there is.
Yes. If you review other papers, you will see this very clearly. And I'm not counting myself as like a professional thing. Like my papers, they're also sometimes they're like a little bit improvable. But you really see, and if you act as a referee, you really see the difference, and you're really annoyed by if there's like bad organization, bad grammar, or something like that. And
because if it will be simply a mistake, that's okay. But there are pieces that you read and you think, I don't even know what feedback to give you.
Exactly.
Because the feedback is, write it again, top to bottom.
Exactly.
From scratch. Not starting from scratch.
And the reviewer is a human being, and the human being will always have like a bias based on their mood. And if you just deplete this mood by basically writing absolute bullshit style.
Which is a very bad feedback. You need to be very concise and precise and actionable.
Exactly.
You need to improve in this way. But the thing that changed for me is thinking of writing as a craft. I imagine myself as a carpenter,
yes.
polishing a chair made of wood and with all the integrated details, and that means that every phrase needs to be precise, needs to be precise, clear, easily readable, and in a very pedagogical structure top to bottom. Because in the end, as we said, academia is a very archaic system, and that also includes the way information is transmitted.
Yeah.
Other fields are evolving much faster with social media, internet, but in academia still we have peer-reviewed papers, journals, editorials, and that's a very slow process. But in the end, the principles are the same. If you can convey the information to the reader in a easy manner, so you make your paper clear and easy to read, engaging, well-structured, pedagogical, so the person reads it and it follows a natural stream of arguments.
Yes.
And every image is on point and they flow through the article without friction because everything is clear with images, with the right words. It's not pedantic, it's not heavy. They will simply say, this is so well written, what else this person has done? Because it's so good, and that in turn includes how they share it with people, how they save it, if they remember it, and that's search engine optimization for paper.
It's literally that, like I think every publication, and I'm including the master thesis here for you, because this is like the first thing that you basically hold out and say like, yeah, this it's me, right? It's my painting, so to say. As you said, if you look at it from a craftsman position, it's every one of them is literally like a poster of yourself, right? That is like an advertisement for yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's very important to get this clear right. On the other hand, I also want to emphasize that if you put this perspective to another extreme, which is also not good, you can work on your thesis forever.
Yes.
And on every paper. Well, the papers, since they vary between 5 and 30 pages most of the time, I would say, maybe a bit less. But the thesis, and especially also later than the PhD thesis, you can really like overdo it. And so you have to, I would say it is the best thing to strive for this excellence, to strive for this optimal goal, right? But if you at some point the deadline is coming closer and you have other stuff to do, perhaps, then you also have to let it go to some degree. Yeah.
I think it's important to identify where you are improving it and when you are changing it.
Exactly.
Because there is a point where it's not better this thing here before or afterwards.
Yes.
It's just different.
Yes.
And at that point you have to let it go.
Yes. And exactly, and here maybe you have to consult also like colleagues or something like that, because at some point after reading a sentence or like a section for the 10th time, you're not reading it anymore, you learn it by heart, and then you don't, you lost the scope, right?
Yeah. So. For that is also very important, don't send anything to anybody that you have not read and correct at least 3 times. I have done it, it's very embarrassing that you send it to someone and that someone gives feedback to you that is painstakingly obvious, and you think, fuck, I should have seen that. Yes. And it's because you are in there and you are hurried and you take a look at this and you send it and you don't think about it twice, and it's a mistake. I think nowadays, it's very easy, at least with that, to check it with Gemini, AI, ChatGPT, whatever. Read it, correct the grammatical mistakes, and give me some suggestions for improvement.
I think also you will improve with regards to that over your academic career, right?
Yeah.
Like in the beginning, it sounds very. It's a little bit more work, and also I know various people who like they are like bachelor students or master students. They're like a bit afraid of like similar stuff, sending emails to like PIs or something like that, right? They was like, I have to check every email twice or 10 times. Of course, PIs don't do that anymore, or like postdocs, right? At some point, you develop a routine, and you have like this just done because you are used to that. Yeah, it increases just like. But I would very much recommend what you said. Take your time at the beginning. And,
and in that regard, when planning for it, I would suggest imagine that your thesis, your deadline is 1 month before your deadline.
Yeah.
And if you are really done by that fake deadline and you have 1 month more, you can always continue doing research, and it will be ultra easy to take your finished thesis and add 10 more pages of an extra project in the end. But if by any chance you need to stretch that writing or processing, because it's always the case that you are writing, and when you write, you think and you realize that what you think was well done work is not, and you are forgetting many things, and you have to double check some results, and that takes time, and that's why writing is such a long process. So give yourself, I would say, a month of margin to make sure you are not 5 days deprived of sleep and over caffeinated just to write something that afterwards you think, it's not that good because I was rushing in the last moment.
Yes, absolutely agree.
So once you're done, congratulations, you have a master thesis.
Yes, very much, right?
We said we wanted to speak about the defense, but I think it's a little bit tight on time.
Yes.
Let's leave it for another episode on oral presentations and defenses.
Yes. And then we can also perhaps talk about more stuff towards the PhD, right?
Yes.
Because then you, in the best case, by the time you finish your master thesis, you already secured a position. But this might not be always the case.
Probably not.
And you should not panic, but you can continue, and we will.
Let's do another episode of
Yes,
researching and applying for positions.
Yes, very much.
Pleasure.
It was. See you next time.
Thank you very much. And for the listeners, if you like it, share it, subscribe, and comment your horror stories of your studies, as well as any other topic that you might be interested, right?
Yes.
Or that we will try to cover more. Thank you very much.